have your attention. Hope you all had a great start to this conference, and to begin with, many thanks to the organizers for this terrific event. It's been a pleasure being back here, and it's really fascinating how well this is all organized. So thanks. And this afternoon, I know that we're standing between you and I think the welcome cocktails, and it's probably been a long first day. But I can promise you, we actually have a really, really interesting topic today, because we're going to talk about, with an esteemed panel of colleagues and friends, we're going to talk about how to engage with partner countries, how to engage with national stakeholders to understand how their national evaluation systems function, how to do diagnostic tools, how to engage them, and then how to measure as sort of the appetizer, and then to do or to get into a conversation on technical assistance and evaluation capacity development. So without further ado, my name is Sven Harten. I'm Deputy Director of DEval, which is the German Development Evaluation Institute. We're basically the government institute to evaluate independently Germany's development cooperation. So we don't do domestic stuff, but we are a government agency. And here today are, as I said, a really great panel of experts in evaluation capacity development. My colleague Sarah Klier, who is a team leader at DEval, and she's working on evaluation capacity development, has been working for the past 10 years. Next to her, we have Sohini Mookherjee, who has two really, really interesting hats. On the one hand, she's working with the Klier initiative, which is part of the Global Evaluation Initiative, but you're also working at DEval and doing some really amazing work in that space. And then the gentleman next to Sohini, probably I don't need to introduce him, but still Marco Segone, the Director of Evaluation from UNFPA. I remember during the first Asian Evaluation Week, you had a panel, or you had a presentation on evaluation capacity development, and I was sitting in the audience, and I was thinking, gosh, one day I want to sit on a panel with Marco and discuss ECD. So thanks for joining us here today. And last but absolutely not least is Radha Ashrit. Radha is leading the monitoring and evaluation unit of NITI Aayog, which is a ministry of the government of India, looking at SDG coordination. And from here, from you, we will hear also a lot of the country perspective. So how can a diagnostic tool on measuring evaluation capacities, how can such a thing be useful to you, but for all of you as well. So we'll have some time for discussions, and if you're not coming up with questions, I'll promise you I'll go around and pick some of you out. So better prepare some questions. So without further ado, Sarah, please tell us about what this INCE thing is that DEval is doing together with its partners.
Waiting for the presentation. And now it's there. Now. So good afternoon, everybody. My name is Sarah. Sven already introduced me. I will introduce the INCE, the Index to Measure National Evaluation Capacities, which is something that was developed and implemented in Latin America, and we would now like to find out if the INCE can be implemented in other regions like Asia. What I want to talk about is why we think that culture and local evaluation approaches matter when we talk about national evaluation systems, and why this means that participation and reflection is really important when measuring those systems. And the third point is that I would like to show how the INCE helps us to align our ECD, the evaluation capacity development work, in Latin America. But I will start with a question to you. As I said, the INCE was developed in Latin America, but I would like to know who of you ever heard about INCE? One. Fantastic, because that's a good baseline, and Sven is my superior, so in the conversation we're having at the end of the year, I can tell you that I more than doubled the number of people who have heard about INCE, and I hope you will have that in mind. Cool, so thanks for this. So please pay attention, because I will have this question for you after the presentation. INCE, how was it developed? I will tell you a little bit about the history, because it tells you a lot about INCE. INCE was born in a meeting similar to this one. I think we were like as many people as we are in this room today. It was a gathering in 2016 of people interested in evaluation capacity development in Latin America. And we were discussing what can we do to strengthen national evaluation systems, and one person from the World Food Programme had the great idea to develop an index to measure those systems. And a working group was formed, and you see here some actors of this working group. This group is growing every year. And what you see here, that part of the working group are universities, VOPs, voluntary organizations for professional evaluation, national evaluation entities, and international actors. So it's a diverse group, and they sat down together on a regular basis virtually and developed an index. And the first question they had to answer was like, okay, if we want to measure national evaluation systems, if we want to like rate them, we need to find out what is the perfect evaluation system, national evaluation system. Of course, they did not have to start from scratch. There is a lot of, no, not a lot of, there is literature on evaluation systems, and there are other diagnostic tools. What this group said, that the national evaluation system is more than the public institutions that make up the system. It's also civil society that demands evaluation and uses evaluation. It's also universities who implement evaluations or who teach evaluators. And of course, it's the evaluators. And in many countries, it's the development agencies. In many countries, they take over like 80 or 90% of the evaluations implemented in a country. So it's a huge thing, this national evaluation system. And how does it need to be? What does it need to have in Latin America to be a good one? The working group came out with 5 dimensions of a national evaluation system, which are illustrated in a tree in the INCE. So each branch is one tree. Each branch is one dimension, sorry. The first dimension is the use of evaluation. A second one is the quality of evaluations. A third one is the institutional structure, how the system is anchored in a country. A fourth dimension is the multi-agent spaces, the room that the different parts of the system have to interact with each other. And a fifth dimension is the evaluation offer. And you don't have to write anything down, because you will find all the information online. So those 5 dimensions are divided into 18 subdimensions and lots of variables and indicators, as you would do with an index. And I will not talk about this, because you will find all of this online. What you will not find is the question we were having about how can you really measure this? Because one thing is you have the indicators and you have a questionnaire and you talk to people and you will find out the theoretical system, but what we'll not find out is how is it really like? What is the real system? And I will explain this by referring to another system, a traffic system. If, say we have an index of traffic systems, you want to compare traffic systems, and we look into the official documents on the systems, we talk with people from the traffic ministry, we will find out that worldwide all the systems are very similar. But they're not, because rules are lived differently. And here's my second question to you. Who of you lives in a country where a red traffic light means stop? Who lives in a country where you need to stop when you come upon a red traffic light? I think this is all of us. And we are living in very different countries. But I think we will still live this rule differently. In Germany, like for example, Sven, I hope you don't mind if I share that Sven lives beautifully in the woods, far away from the city. And Sven, I guess if you drive home in the middle of the night to the middle of the woods, you haven't seen another car for hours, you're in Germany, you will still stop at a red traffic light. And in other countries, you're like, okay, no harm being done, me going on. So it's a rule, it's very simple, but it's treated differently. Some people just accept the rule and some people think about the rule. Or traffic signs, a really easy thing. In Germany, we have more than 500 traffic signs, but if you speak to officials from the traffic system, they would tell you, so we have the signs, people know what they mean, perfect. But that's not the case. Like in this street, the picture I brought you, it's not from AI, it's not fake, it's how German streets often look like. Nobody knows if you can park there or not. So you can find this out only if you interact with people. And the last picture I brought you is from the city where I live, it's Bonn. And this is a street right next to the Rhine, it's really beautiful. I go there by bike every day. But it used to be a street 2 years ago only for cars, and now it's a street for bikes. So a system changes, it changes constantly. So all this needs to be part of a measurement of a system. It's easier to understand when you talk about a traffic system which you use on a regular basis and which is not the case with an evaluation system. Other things are, like there are unspoken hierarchies between different parts of the traffic system. Like sometimes the size of a vehicle tells you how much power the person has in the system. And then each traffic system, and each evaluation system has different parts. And that looks very different in each country. Like people on a boat, on a motorbike, on a bike are different. Well, in some countries they're a strong part of the system, and in other countries not at all. And still, an index needs to include all this. How do we do this with the INCE? The first thing, so now I tell you how the INCE is measured there, coming back to evaluation systems. The first step is we sit down with a national evaluation entity and talk about INCE. Like, let's say a country like Mexico is interested in INCE. We sit down with the national evaluation entity, tell them what INCE is all about, and tell them also what they have to do and what we have to do. Because it's the national evaluation entity that needs to have 100% of ownership. It's them who manage INCE. They decide who should answer the questionnaire to measure the indicators, which actors. And then data collection takes place, and then data analysis takes place. This is supported by national or regional evaluation experts. And then the results of the INCE, this takes like 2 months altogether, are shared with a national evaluation entity, let's say for Mexico. And then the entity can decide if they want to have a use workshop. A workshop to discuss the INCE results, and all countries want such a workshop. And this is we would say, the heart of INCE, because in such a workshop, it would be another gathering like this one, in person or virtual one, where all those actors who've been involved in the data collection would sit together and discuss the national evaluation system. And in many countries, this is the first time that the national evaluation system meets. I mean, a system is constantly changing, but core actors are meeting and discussing what they should do together to strengthen the system. And this is why national networks are built around the INCE. And we can see that pretty nicely because often in the first round of measurements, there are not so many people involved. And in the second round, after 2 years, there are more people. Like in the Dominican Republic, 2 years ago, we had only one person outside the public sector involved in INCE, but now in the second round, we had the youth workshop on Wednesday, there were 51 persons. So this network is growing. Also, to the workshops, countries would often invite their peers. Let's say in Colombia, we found that the youth dimension was rather weak, so they invited Mexico, where this dimension is very strong. Costa Rica was invited to Peru, Peru was invited to the Dominican Republic, so a regional network is also growing. And this also entails the international actors, like the UN agencies. The Inter-American Development Bank is a very active actor in the INCE network. And we would all together look on those results, and of course we would also see what can we do together to strengthen the weaker parts of the system and to learn from the stronger parts. We have monthly meetings on the regional level. There are weekly meetings between the World Food Programme and DEval. We coordinate this meeting. And there are more and more actors who get more and more engaged on the regional level, because what we also do is we simply inform each other what we are doing in ECD. Like UNICEF has this famous Excel course. They tell us where this will take place, whom we should invite, who could be a professor. We tell, okay, we go into this conference. Do you know anybody? Whom should we invite to which conference? Things like this, like the international actors, we align our work based on the INCE, which I think is good development cooperation practice. Just because this question comes up a lot, so I already told you the measurement takes around 2 months, and it costs, in Latin America, it's always below $3,000, more or less. Because of also, like, the national entity has a lot of work to do. So what are the benefits of INCE from our perspective? It's above all the national networks that are built, because we believe that to strengthen a system, you really need to bring together those different parts of the system. And they themselves have to define what is the way forward. Then it's the regional network. I think I explained that, which we really benefit from a lot in Latin America. And then, of course, it's also, and that's the third part, as you see, the third point, the data. Of course, the data shows you how to strengthen the systems. It also is like a baseline data. It shows you how different systems develop. And of course, it's useful for academic work. You can download everything. You can go on DEval.org or use this QR code, and there you find everything, almost everything I told you. You can go on data, and then you select a country, and then you can download the Excel files for each country, the last measurement. So students can really work with that, professors can really work with the INCE. And INCE is already part of 2 curricula in Latin American universities. So this all sounds pretty nice. It is, but it also works in Latin America so far. And we are keen to find out if this could work in another region. So this is the World Food Programme and DEval, but also other actors like UNICEF, UN Women, hopefully soon UNFPA, because we think it's very helpful for our work in Latin America. But we're not sure if it could work, because it's Latin American, which means it has a Latin American component, like this participation. It's part of Latin American public policy a lot. We don't know if such a participatory and very transparent process works everywhere. Like in a very hierarchical culture, could that work, INCE? Also, this is a question I would love to talk about with you. Yeah, and here we are. We would like to find this out. And we would also like to link INCE stronger with other diagnostic tools, such as the one Sohini will present in a minute, and the MESA tool. We have one experience from Colombia where we did an INCE, and it was shown that the use dimension was very weak. Well, rather weak in Colombia. And then the MESA, this diagnostic tool Sohini will present, was implemented with a special focus on use. And this was really, really helpful for the national evaluation entity. So yeah, this is the way forward for us. If you have any more questions after this panel, we're more than happy to discuss this. Of course, I have another question to you. I already warned you. So who of you has heard of INCE? Okay, more people, that's good. So thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Sarah. That's it's been great. And please, Sohini, take the stage. So Sarah mentioned, good coordination between development partners. Oh. And since INCE is, as you said, not the only tool, now you'll hear about another diagnostic tool that Klier implemented, and here in the region. So we'll get actually some cases right from the region. So please.
Thanks, Sven. Hi, everyone. I'm Sohini from Klier, South Asia. So I'll talk about one use case that we did in Bhutan. So we will literally travel geographically to Asia now and talk about how we used a diagnostic tool to deliver a product to the government. I'll use, if you could set up the, okay, great. You can hear me, right? Okay, great. So just a quick introduction to who Klier is. So Klier is actually, as Sven mentioned, it's part of Klier initiative, which was set up by World Bank in 2011, actually. We are based in DEval, South Asia, and more broadly, our work is directly with the government in building and strengthening M&E systems and processes. We are also part of Global Evaluation Initiative, which is actually a global partnership of multiple M&E providers, actors, organizations who are working to build M&E systems around the world. The GEI is actually co-led by World Bank and UNDP, but then many other partners. I see many colleagues here who are also part of GEI. So I wanted to really take a step back and talk about the Bhutan context and how, so the government will not come and ask you for a diagnostics, right? So the government will come and ask you to solve a problem. And here, the context of Bhutan is very, very important to keep in mind. So this was 2022, around that time, when the government, 2023, around that time, the government had come to us. And Bhutan that time was going through a transition. So for those of you who may not be familiar with the Bhutan context, they had something called the Gross National Happiness Commission, which is their apex body for all things monitoring and evaluation, right? And this was 2022 when that got disintegrated. And the powers were then realigned and divided with Cabinet and Ministry of Finance. So that was one key change that Bhutan was undertaking. I see somebody nodding in the room. Around the same time, Bhutan also transitioned out of the least developed countries status. They were also undertaking their 13th five-year plan, and there was a lot of focus that the country actually gave to Bhutan becoming a high-income country, and they had set 2034 as their cutoff date to achieve that. Around the same time, the country was also undergoing elections. and there was the government was getting formed. So the country came to us, the cabinet specifically had come to us to say that, it is a very donor-dependent country, so essentially every 5 years, the donor comes and gives a pot of money. The donors are actually doing evaluation, which are 5 year, which changes every 5 years, right? But then there is no long-term plan, long-term thinking that the government is doing. So there was a need to develop a long-term M&E vision, so to say, which will provide a long-term trajectory when it comes to planning, budgeting, monitoring, and evaluation, and they needed our support to come up with a 10-year plan. So I think for us, we had to take a step back. So the request was for developing an M&E framework. So we had almost a year-long discussion with the cabinet to understand what does an M&E framework actually look like, so that we are able to capture what the government had in mind. So the way we kind of defined this in the project was, this is going to be a comprehensive guide that will help the government understand a more long-term strategic direction that will provide that direction for all things planning, monitoring, budgeting, and evaluation. That will almost give them a vision of where the country will go, which will help them meet that long-term goal. So the project had 3 main deliverables. I think what we set out to do was to kind of come to an agreement with the cabinet colleagues to say that this document would have a whole of the government approach. Again, this is not something that we are doing once as external experts and leaving the place. What we are doing is we are co-developing with the government, something that Sarah also highly stressed on. This is something that we keep on updating every 3 years. So this should be a living document so that it is as true as what the country is going through at that particular period of time. There should be routine reviews that the government undertakes. This document is also something that will provide interlinkage. So it's not just about defining the future plan, future budget, future monitoring and evaluation activities of the government, but how do they interact with each other? So it should also give some sort of a future direction. So for existential questions like, should Bhutan continue with 5-year plan, or should it not do 5-year plans anymore and do it more in a twice in every 2 years? These are the questions that this document should definitely answer, but at the same time, also explain the roles and responsibilities of different ministries, which was very critical because of the transition that the country was going through. And finally, it should also talk about actionable steps that are critical for strengthening the planning, budgeting, monitoring, and evaluation system. So again, partnership is key. So we had amazing group of partners who were helping us in the project. So definitely our cabinet colleagues, but at the same time, we were working with UNDP, Bhutan. We had a local consultant who was also working with the government before, who could really guide us in the work, as well as GEI, who was involved in the project. So I think before I talk about how we used MESA in this project, I think one point I do wanted to highlight is, oftentimes when we think of working and building country systems, we kind of think of it in a very linear way, which doesn't work in practice, right? We think that, okay, we will do a meeting with the government. Once we do the meeting with the government, we will do a diagnostics, and then voila, we have an M&E system made. But that doesn't work, which was in this case where the government came to us not for doing the diagnostics. The government wanted the solution. And so often the work that we do, and all of us do in our own countries, I think it is a lot more nuanced, where it is a constant negotiation and discussion with the government to understand how and where we want to leverage diagnostics, but also solve the problem that the country is facing at that point in time. So what is MESA? Again, MESA is a diagnostic tool like INCE is. It is essentially developed by GEI using other diagnostic tools that are out there. So it kind of borrows heavily from other diagnostic tools as well. But essentially, it tries to answer these two questions. What is it that the country already has in place? So it's almost like going to a doctor. Before you take the medicine, you need to understand what is the problem, right? So what does the country already have in place, and what are the opportunities to further strengthen the M&E ecosystem? It also it's kind of designed to identify the gaps, the strengths. What is it that different ministries, departments can learn from each other? Maybe planning has something which finance can learn from, so on and so forth. It is something that is designed for a wide range of users that also Sarah mentioned, which is also something INCE has. But I think one point that I do wanted to highlight is it's also very flexible, right? So it's completely up to you how you want to use a diagnostics, whether you want to use it just to do desk review or to do some sort of initial assessment or do in-depth analysis. And GEI recognizes MESA along with INCE and CAT to do this kind of diagnostics. So it has 5 key elements. The first is it provides, you can think about doing some sort of background analysis of the country. The second is, the public sector management, then monitoring and reporting, then evaluation, and then the findings. But again, these are not set in stone. So if you want to focus on one element, because of the nature of the work demands that, you are more than welcome to use it in that way as well. So when it comes to this context of Bhutan that I was talking about, the way we did was we used MESA to undertake the desk research that we did. We also supplemented it with online surveys, and we undertook series of interviews. So we spoke to close to about 14, 15 ministries, departments, to really understand some of the challenges and unique situations that each of them have. And MESA really helped us in kind of undertake that. So how did it help us, right? So I think it helped us tease out some of the specific guidance that we wanted to give, right? So we used MESA to tease out the specific action points that we were recommending the government to undertake. I think another element which worked out great, so we keep on saying, it is co-ownership. So what does that actually mean, right? So actually what we learned is co-ownership with the government counterparts doesn't mean you go and ask them for to sit through interviews, right? Because that's not really engaging with them. I think one thing that really helped us in MESA, in Bhutan, was we gave them case studies. So for example, and I have a concrete example here, is performance management challenge of civil servant is a big problem that government counterparts kept on mentioning time and time again. And what we felt was Korea had a very similar issue that that country was also facing. So what we did is we developed a case study. And then we said, okay, this is how Korea solved it. We sat with the government and then said, okay, if this is how Korea is solving, what does it mean for Bhutan? What are the elements that you like, that you want to use in Korea, and why you don't want to use certain elements? So for each of the issues or challenges they identified, we came up with a global case study and then helped them think through and then get that buy-in of what works and what doesn't, depending on the context of Bhutan. And that did help the government counterpart also situate their unique problem to other case studies that are out there in the globally. I wanted to kind of end this by talking quickly about what does the diagnostics in terms of what is the thinking, right? So what did we learn from this example of Bhutan, and what are the things that we have learned for any future diagnostic work that we will do with the government in future? So I think the first thing is, and I think all of us would agree, is building country evaluation system. It requires a lot of time, a lot of investment, where co-ownership of the government counterpart is very, very critical, because we shouldn't be like outside experts coming in and forcing something that the government will not find it useful to begin with. I think the other aspect is diagnostics can be globally informed, so we can definitely leverage international examples that have worked out in different countries, but grounding them locally is very, very important. So for us, UNDP, the fact the UNDP country office is based in Bhutan, we had a local consultant who really understood Bhutan was very, very critical, because they could actually give us examples of what would work in the country and what would not. I think any diagnostics flexibility is very important, because a diagnostics that you will do at a systems level might be very different from the diagnostics that you will do maybe for a particular ministry or at the subnational unit as well. I think one point is, I don't want us to take away that diagnostics is an end in itself. It is a means, right? So it is supposed to be nimble, it is supposed to be flexible, but ultimately it is a means to an end of solving the problem that the government is facing. And here, I think what I wanted to touch upon are two key takeaways for us specifically as Klier South Asia and how we are thinking of diagnostics in our future work. One is there is need to do rapid diagnostics. So what we realized is if we tell the government that, okay, our diagnostics will take 1 year, I'm pretty sure Radha ma'am will be like, what is this? We don't have 1 year, right? So it is supposed to be, it should have a very quick turnaround time. And I think another part is because MESA was, the questions, the guidance is very much at the systems level. What we realized is when we are going at the subnational unit, you need to be much more specific. The questions need to be much more granular. So what we are doing in Klier South Asia is thinking of how this diagnostics can be useful for our subnational work in India. We do a lot of subnational work with the government of India in different states. So for example, we are thinking of these questions more in 3 buckets. So data governance, monitoring, and evaluation, and then thinking about 3 levels, so your individual, your organizational, and then systems level. So if I give you the example, if I'm going to an officer in a department, in Department of, say, Agriculture, or Department of Finance in Government of Tamil Nadu, maybe one question I can ask is whether they have the capacity to carry out evaluations, so more at an individual officer level. Then thinking at the organizational level, whether there are strategies or guidelines for systematic evaluation, whether they have the funding which is mandated, whether there is an evaluation use case that is there. And then at the institutional level, whether there is an evaluation policy or whether there is a dedicated budget. So there is a need to think in all these levels to be much more specific. And give more actionable guidance to the government. And incidentally, the Capacity Building Commission of India, which is the apex body for capacity building of Government of India officers, they also recognize the value of diagnostics. So what they say is diagnostics need to take place before you come up with any capacity building work. So, which is also a big step in the right direction. And I'll end it there. Thank you.
Thank you, Sohini. I'm going to take a few questions just for clarification from the audience. If there's something from the 2 presentations that has not been really clear, this is your chance now. But before that, let me see who knows the name of this hotel. Can I see a show of hands? Okay, well, I hope for those who you find your way back home or to the other hotel. But no, this was just to check whether you're here and awake and listening. So more importantly, who of you has been working with diagnostic tools, looking at evaluation systems? Okay, few, some very few. So who, after hearing this, thinks, no, I know the problem, actually, I don't need any of those tools. So who wants to go straight to action? Oh, okay. So, and who would think, hey, I heard something interesting here, Mesa or INCE, I'd like to know a bit more. Oh, wow. Great. Okay, perfect. So did you get that for for the feedback to the session? Please record. No, okay. In the meantime, any quick questions for clarification from the audience? Something burning here? No? Oh, yes, please. And just kindly introduce yourself.
Actually, it's Sarah, you told that there are 84 indicators for measuring the capacities. So my question is, what is the composition, qualitative and quantitative, and how you assess a system with numbers that we learned in the morning at Tim's plenary that numbers can mislead sometimes. So what is your real experience in using this 84 indicators in measuring the capacities? Thank you.
That's an amazing question, and perhaps you can just briefly touch upon this, but that would be something for a larger discussion afterwards as well.
Segone, for this very good question. There are quantitative and qualitative indicators. And actually, when I sat down, I'm like, okay, I left out the participation part of the data collection. So there are different actors who respond to the questionnaire, and they do it as a group and reflect upon how they judge the different indicators. And when you download the file for each country, you see that we analyze it per group, like the outside perspective, the inside perspective, the VOP perspective, and then we take it all together. So this is touching a little bit on the point from this morning. But please have a look at those indicators and discuss them with us. But I also want to share, and here I already stopped, that we found this is too much. There are too many indicators. The questionnaire is too long, and we have to condensate this. And this is currently being done. So if you have a look at the same homepage I think in a few weeks, there will be less. We're constantly adapting INCE.
Yeah, well, adaptability, flexibility has been highlighted by both of you. So now let's move to the panelists. And Marco, if I may start with you. You know, we didn't, at least I didn't hear either Sarah or Sohini claiming that this is the first of its kind. It's terribly unique, and I guess in your experience, you've seen probably many diagnostic tools, many attempts to look at measuring national evaluation systems. So from your perspective, not necessarily talking about like individual tools, but is that to some extent, is that a useful starting point? Or as Sohini mentioned, you know, you need to get that problem first, and then you do a diagnostic. So how can those tools actually help to strengthen evaluation systems in your experience? Thank you.
You know, thanks a lot, Sven. And first of all, I mean, really a great pleasure to be here to this very interesting panel. As you mentioned, I mean, national evaluation capacity development has been part of my DNA for a few decades now. But most importantly, I think that this panel, we had the great opportunity of hearing to really two fascinating experiences. Now, about the questions on how diagnostic tools can really contribute to national evaluation systems, I think, first of all, just to always keep in mind that depends on the relevance and the quality of this tool. And as I just mentioned, I mean, we just hear about two very fascinating experiences. And they have both communalities, but also differences somehow. And they really very much complement each other. Commonalities is that both of the system, both of the tools presented, they really look at the systemic approach. And that's very important. Very often when we talk about capacity development, we always think about the capacities of individuals to carry out evaluations, etc. And that's obviously very important, but is not sufficient. The second level of a systemic approach for national evaluation capacity development is really about the institutional level. As we already heard, really, does the country have the systems, the mechanism in place, the normative framework that clearly indicates the roles and responsibilities of different stakeholders, the budget, etc. But most importantly, the enabling environment. Really, is there demand for evaluation, and is there capacities to use evaluations? So both systems very clearly, they have this, both tools very clearly, they have this systemic approach, and that's absolutely core to it. Having said that, I hear two experiences that they can really very much complement each other. I mean, what I like very much of the MESA is really this whole of government approach. I mean, often there are many tools existing, as you mentioned, but often these tools, they are applied to one particular line ministry or somehow in isolation. So having a whole of government approach is really key to inform national evaluation systems. But also, the experience of Bhutan that was presented, I think what was really quite unique, I mean, not only in the case of Bhutan, but let's say there are just few cases where all these discussions about how to strengthen national evaluation systems happen in the framework of a reform, a public reform. In the case of Bhutan was a civil service reform. And that's very important so that the national M&E system is not looked once again in isolation, but is very much interlinked to a national public reform, and very often also to the budgeting process of the country. So that really makes it transformative. While in the case of INCE, we have a different look at it, and the focus is very much on participation. And as Sarah mentioned, I think that comes very much also from the local culture in Latin America. And so this focus on participation is absolutely key to make sure that it's the entire society, so not only the governments, but also civil society, the parliament, academia, that they come together really to shape the national evaluation systems. And also the examples that you gave of the regional network where you have a kind of peer-to-peer practice exchange. That's also, I think, something very, very powerful. So, yeah, absolutely, there are many tools out there, but I think that these two examples, they really brings really the core of what capacity development should be.
Thank you, Marco. So Radha, now moving from Marco's global perspective to your daily work, right? I mean, you've done some really important steps in monitoring and evaluation. Perhaps you can talk a bit about sort of the advances that you already achieved, but then also the challenges that you're facing and how diagnostic tools could come in to support you, to support your work.
Thank you very much. It is a wonderful feeling that we are present here, because after a chaotic events happened so that we were here. So it is very difficult to even feel that I am still here I am in front of everyone because the ADB members knows that how it was difficult for us to get all the clearance, and we are here right now. So with that words, I would like to, I represent India. So I am working in the National Institution for Transforming India, that is NITI Aayog. So this is a mandated agency, and it is a think tank, the apex think tank of Government of India, mandated to do all the monitoring and evaluation of various schemes and programs and initiatives which are direct impact on the socio-economic development, overall socio-economic development of the citizens. So in our country, though these diagnostic tools they have mentioned, I would like to highlight here what are the mechanisms mandated in our own system, monitoring and evaluation system. It's already present there. Yes, we do have our challenges, but I would like to touch upon each and every one of the initiatives which we have done. We do have a proper system put in place for doing monitoring as well as evaluation. Evaluation can happen only when we are monitoring. So that it is a after effect of monitoring, the schemes and programs will come into the evaluation. So we do have a framework, a very specific framework, which we have studied from the global level inputs, highlighting that how we can translate the monitoring framework in our country. As you all know, every monitoring framework will have inputs, outputs, outcome, and impact. So this is a theory of change it is happening. So that we have modeled in our system. That is called the Output Outcome Monitoring Framework. It is part of our every year financial budget. It is called outcome budget. So each and every schemes of Government of India, whether it is 2 crore or whether it is 20,000 crore. Crore is in our own currency. So this is being monitored based on not only the outputs, but the outcome. What is it is being translated into the performance of the schemes as well as the all the initiatives Government of India is putting up. So that is one is output outcome monitoring framework. We are following it, and that is reviewed at the highest level. So that there is a review is there, so there can be course correction or mid-course correction, target settings, all those things will be taken into consideration. Before this output outcome monitoring framework, I would also like to highlight that where the data comes. So the data quality index, that also we have developed, that is monitored for various schemes and the same schemes and programs of Government of India. We do, whether the ministry, national level or subnational level, do we have the capacity to capture those indicator information so that it can be monitored in a systematic manner, or how the system is adapted or system is geared up to get the information with all the existing facilities or infrastructure available. So that also we have another diagnostic tool that is called data quality index, that is DGQI. So this is basically from the data level, is it available or not at the country level? Then we are going to the collection of the data, that is output outcome monitoring framework for the particular scheme. Now then we are coming to into the evaluation studies. Evaluation, we do have a demand. Sir mentioned about the demand. Yes, there is a constant demand from Department of Expenditure, even from other ministries, please evaluate our schemes. So that currently we are doing the evaluation of all the centrally sponsored schemes. That means the scheme or the project which have share of both the federal government as well as the subnational governments. They have a say in that particular scheme, whether it is performing well or not. If it is performing, then can we scale it up? Or if it is not performing, then can we remodel it or revamp it? All those things are happening. Now, currently, we are in the process of doing 9 sector-specific evaluation studies in our country. Other than that, to create a robust monitoring and evaluation ecosystem in our country, we do have partnership with international agencies like JPAL, BMGF. Now we are going to make a SOI with a new development bank. So all those partners and all those things we are doing so that the partnership, we can create the capacity not only within the system, but also we can create the capacity at the subnational levels. In addition to that, we are doing, yeah, you very well, Sohini mentioned that we are all short of time. We have to evaluate, study. So for that purpose, what Government of India has initiated is rapid evaluation. That actually what we are doing is strengthening the universities, how they can create a monitoring and evaluation system within the college level or university level, so that we will have a army of evaluators present in our nook and corner of our country, so that as per the requirement of the local need, it can be done at that level itself, rather than going to a national level or international level. So our people will also get trained. So that we are doing. That will help us. We feel it will give us not only an academic rigor to that the kind of diagnostics we are creating, it will also create a pool of trained, skillful manpower in the M&E system. That's all I would like to. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, maybe maybe there already an invitation. Maybe not. Maybe you should come to our country and do some evaluation capacity development, please. Because when I hear that you're getting requests, demands from different ministries to do evaluations on national programs and even subnational. We're 20 years from that, and I don't feel it's progressing into the right direction. So please come to visit us in Germany seriously.
Sure.
But also seriously, with all the interesting work and all those partners you're working with, one thing I didn't hear is to what extent, comparing, and of course it's, given the size of India, it's kind of hard, but to what extent comparing your evaluation system to evaluation systems in other countries would be something where you feel, hey, that this could give me some interesting additional input to our work. Or I believe, when you're partnering with the new development bank or with foundations from the US, probably they come in with experiences from other countries. So to what extent are you looking, at other countries for inspiration? Don't look at our country, at least not in terms of positive, but what other countries are you looking at, or to what extent could that be interesting?
Actually, for especially that monitoring and evaluation framework which we have developed, though we looked into other Mexico, South Korea, Australia, France, we have looked into it, but we could not able to see that how they have linked the performance with the budget. Though World Bank have an initiative called P4R, that program for results, we also were trying to adopt it in the result-based financing. So, but we would definitely like to see how the other countries, if they have benefited through the P4R programs, so we would like to know that one. So how the monitoring framework they have developed for that particular activity, we can still look into that one and how that can be helpful to us as a country perspective. And evaluation, we definitely look into the countries which have already done the evaluations, the kind of tools they have developed for evaluation metrics, or definitely we are using the OECD DAC framework we are using. Having said that, any other framework other countries have utilized for their evaluation studies, that if we can get to know to those kind of tools, that will be very helpful to us. Thank you.
Thank you. And Marco, so this is a question not from the script, but I'm sure that you have a really inspiring answer or helpful answer. You know, when I look at INCE, when I look at those diagnostic tools, for me there's this tension between having all the data publicly available and sort of creating a public open source database where you can compare start to compare ecosystems, just as in some indices you see on other topics. But on the other hand, you know, when you create those public domains with all the data, then the process to get there, the political discussions and so on, are quite time consuming. And there's some value probably in diagnostic tools that you just do and do it confidently with your national stakeholders. So from your experience, from your rich experience, where do you see, you know, like, should we as an evaluation profession be pushing towards? Or maybe it's not sort of a choice either or, but maybe we want to have both. But how do you see this issue of, you know, having this public platform, that website with all the data out there? Is that maybe even a risk? So how do you where do you see this issue? Thank you.
Well, perhaps I would say that the answer is already, from my perspective, in the presentation that actually Sarah gave, in the sense that you know, she started saying very clearly that the context is so important. And so I think that first of all, it's very important that whatever diagnostic tool, whatever database, etc., is not led by an external stakeholder, but actually is led by national stakeholders. And that makes all the difference. Now, as international stakeholders, I think you know, we can be there. You know, these kind of tools, they have both a technical but somehow also a political contribution to do. I mean, the technical is pretty obvious. So, you know, they provide the assessment of the national evaluation systems in a certain country, in a certain point of time, identifying what are the weaknesses and the strengths, and proposing a technical roadmap on how to strengthen it, etc. So that's the easy part. But then there is also, if I may call it, the political use of it. And it's very much linked, once again, to the participation, to the engagement of very different stakeholders that goes beyond the government. You know, I'm personally also one of the advocates of the importance of engaging parliamentarians, for example, in all of these discussions, because at the end of the day, the parliaments are those who make accountable or demand accountability to the government, in addition, obviously, to the citizens. So these kind of tools, the process can really be used to mobilize the different stakeholders to identify national champions, so that they are the one that can push forward the frontiers that you are talking about. So to me, once again, it should be really national owned and country-led, and that's very much linked to the local context.
So, colleagues, floor is yours for questions from the audience. Again, please briefly introduce yourself, and I see already many hands coming up, so please be concise with your question or comments. The gentleman over there was first, and then
hello, and thanks everyone for the inspiring sessions. I really learned a lot. My name is Chen, and I'm the monitoring and evaluation specialist from UNDP China. And today's session is very, very connected to my own duties with the institution. So my question is actually inspired by today morning's speaker speech, which says like evaluation data or evidence information matrix shouldn't be the target in the end, because he put it in the metaphor of the ambulance. So I'm also quite curious in terms of how the National Evaluation Capacity Index or the diagnosis tools should be used backwards, like pushing for good evaluation, because it's from my own experiences of working with monitoring evaluation. Because if you think about the organization structure of risk management, human resources, procurement, everything is horizontal. However, evaluation is like vertical, but evaluation is horizontally to assess everything. How does it do for the relevancy, effectiveness, efficiency of the development program as a whole? So I'm very, very curious in terms of the diagnosis tools or the index. How does that incorporate that into our management's response, and how does that really could be integrated into the system or into the institution or even into a national context? Thank you.
perfect. Thank you. And I would take your question as well.
Good afternoon. My name is Leah Raymond. I'm here from the Cook Islands government. For those who don't know, the Cook Islands is a titsy tiny country in the Pacific Ocean, and we have a total population of about 15,000 people. So that being said, we have one big road that goes around our main island, which is 32 kilometers. We have no traffic lights. So my question is, as a country, we have a tricky relationship to indices, because when you live in a country like this, what applies to other countries often doesn't apply to us. We've just wrapped up the MESA in our country, and that was incredibly interesting and very informative. I wonder what the INCE would provide that the MESA doesn't for a country like ours.
Okay, yes, please. A third one, and then.
Hi, this is Ting Yang. I'm independent evaluation researcher and consultant. Actually, my question was for the previous session, but I found it applies to here as well. So as we all know and see, development efforts have been constantly and repeatedly made over years and years. So my question would be to Sarah and Marco. How would you rate it if we see we have a spectrum to address the root cause and to address the symptoms? So in this spectrum, how would you rate your effort using your own example? How pessimistic or optimistic you remain for the future? Thank you.
Sorry, I didn't get your last sentence. Just
how optimistic you might remain for future. Thank you.
okay. Who wants to take the question on improving quality of evaluation work through indices or diagnostic tools? Sohini, yes. Okay.
What we did, it was actually a very interesting question, about evaluation. So I can talk about a Bhutan example. So I think I would almost respond that it's a journey, right? I mean, it's not about the destination, it's about working with the government and helping them understand the value of evaluation. So in the case of Bhutan, because it is so donor dependent, when there is a donor gives money as part of donor requirement, they do evaluation. But at present, the country doesn't do evaluation of its own. So for us, it was about negotiating with the government and helping them understand that even if you have, say, a road construction project, you should definitely earmark certain percentage of the budget to undertaking that evaluation, because only then you would understand whether the money has been spent in the right direction. and bringing that element into the 13 5-year plans, for us, that itself was a big win. But again, as I said, it's a journey, so it's a long process ahead. Yeah, I don't know whether I answered your question.
Okay, but perhaps Marco, I'll ask also you, because you know, you've been working at many different multilateral agencies. So as you know, as if an UN agency is part of the evaluation system, so how can your evaluations be strengthened through such an exercise, or do you have other mechanisms in place that are more relevant?
I mean, the good news is that when it comes to the United Nations system, we have our own diagnostic tool. It's not exactly like the one that are presented, because of course a United Nations agency is pretty different from a country. In the case of the United Nations, we have what we call the peer review. So we have a network that is called the United Nations Evaluation Group that brings together the evaluation offices of 48 different UN agencies. And within this network of professional UN evaluators, we carry out these peer reviews, meaning, for example, I myself, I chair the peer review of the World Food Program evaluation function, together with other colleagues, both from the United Nations, but also from civil society, from OECD countries. And in that case, for the first time, again, talking about participation and diversity, in that case, myself as chair, I invited also a parliamentarian from a country to be in the peer review. I also invited young evaluators to be in the peer review, again, to make sure that different perspectives, the diversity of different perspectives, can really enrich the discussion. So it's not exactly, but somehow it's also a diagnostic tools. You know, in the case of the United Nations, we have what we call the evaluation norm and standards that somehow set the normative framework for the evaluation functions in the different United Nations agencies. And so we try to look at how the evaluation function of one agency is compliant to these norm and standards for the UN system. And you know, how to make sure that this kind of tool can make a difference is that the results are presented to the executive board of the agency. So in the case, and I'm not sure it's a good example, but in the case of a government or of a country, would be pressed to the parliament, because the executive boards of the UN agencies are composed by the ambassador of the different member states to the United Nations. So it's a very open and transparent process. The results are presented, as I said, to the executive board, and there is a management response. And we have to report back to the executive board about the recommendation that comes from the peer review are implemented or not. So that would be in the context of the UN.
Perfect. So Sarah, how applicable is INCE to small countries, as small as Cook's Islands, or maybe slightly larger, but also, so how applicable is it to small countries? And what happens in a situation where a country already had a MESA?
Thanks for this excellent question. I think first I need to visit Cook Islands to know the answer, actually. But it really touches on the essence of INCE. So on the data level, INCE cannot provide you more than MESA. MESA goes much deeper than INCE. But what the INCE is doing is it enables peer-to-peer learning. And when you dive into literature on capacity development, you will very early, easily find out that peer-to-peer learning is the most powerful mechanism when adults learn. Like children learn differently, but adults learn from each other. So peer-to-peer learning is a very strong tool when we talk about capacity development. And so the Cook Islands would have a huge network from whom to learn. I think this is one point. And the other point is what happened in those countries in Latin America is that oftentimes the national evaluation entities, they feel like, okay, we have the responsibility that the evaluation in this country, that it works. We are the system. And INCE shows that this is not the case. There are many more parts, and we need to know how to connect with each other. I think Radha showed that really nice when she said that universities are now teaching what is really helpful for the national evaluation system. And this happened, for example, in Costa Rica, where the universities included parts in their master of evaluation that the INCE found to be very weak, that evaluators were not doing in a good way. So the peer-to-peer learning and this network component, the national network building, is something INCE would offer to a small island state. However, we also talk about weaknesses here, I think. Yeah, and INCE, I think, would need to be adapted, of course, to a country like yours.
So now I have to confess that the question from the third question that we had, I only remember how optimistic are you about the future, but there was something before. Being an optimist, you know, this was what stuck in my mind, but would you mind coming up again and asking your question? I think it was to Marco or Sarah, but okay. So you, Sohini, how do you rate your efforts?
I guess I don't know how to rate our efforts, to be honest, but I think there's a long path ahead, and I think one good thing about both INCE and MESA is they're not prescriptive. We value the need to work with different partners, so each of these tools are jointly administered with multiple agencies, development partners, government together to build to develop and build the country M&E system. So I'm hopeful and I'm optimistic, to answer your question. Yeah.
Great. Are there any other questions from the audience? Yes, please.
Chris Nelson from the World Bank. So I have a question. Interestingly, we are the home of the trust fund GEI, and the architecture of that is super interesting in regards to the MESA and the notion of these multiple diagnostics. We seem to be very good at coming up with multiple diagnostics and kind of not believing that the one that went previous was actually good enough for what we want to do. I think there's an element of that here. But Sven, this is maybe a question for you. You highlight the fact that Germany, like the United States, like Australia, probably like Norway, like a number of other countries, do a very bad job at actually building evaluation into its government systems. I was just looking up the Australian Treasury website, and there is a Centre for Evaluation, and they have kind of 4 dimensions for that, 4 criteria, if you like, of their evaluation. That's it. And we're now looking at 84, which we're applying to governments in South America. And I'd be interested in terms of the actual number, because I think you had 7 up there, and I think there's 33 countries. So I wonder how extensive we are. But I wonder, Sven, how comfortable you are living in the development world, making a judgment on the imposition and expectations that we have of these countries, given that we're kind of donating and expecting a lot more of others than we are of ourselves. And I think this particularly applies to the Cook Islands, where I look and I think, wow, why on earth are we doing a measure study of the Cook Islands in regards to their evaluation capacity? Probably because they asked for it, but the measure has been rolled out in Malawi, in Bhutan, in Cook Islands, Solomon Islands, I think. These are all countries where the dynamic, the power dynamic, is really problematic. So Sven, I wonder if you could give us an answer.
Okay. I'm wondering whether I should now call for Chatham House rules and you know, or do the complete opposite. Perhaps let's do the complete opposite actually. You know, like I think the time has actually come. You know, that that our partners in the development space come and get back to what used to be called donors, right? To development partners from the global north, and not only tell them, look, we want to do and we can do our own evaluations, as Marco said, you know, do country-led evaluations, but also push countries in the global north and say, well, you know what, you guys, you need to do a damn better job at home. I think in the development cooperation space, for most bilateral countries in the OECD, that part of the evaluation system works reasonably well. So in that sense, you know, I do think that there's some expertise that we can still bring to the table, but at the same time we are learning a lot, and as I seriously intended to invite you to come, I think now is where we can definitely learn, and where also you know, when you country representatives being present here, you know, when you speak to the German ambassadors or counterparts from, well, I can't talk about other countries, but you know, representatives from my country, you know, help to push for evidence-based policy making, because in some areas in Germany, like labor market, for instance, it's not that bad, but overall it's not great. So if we would do an INCE or a MESA, quite some room for evaluation capacity development. So in that sense, no, I mean, time has come to push all countries to become a lot better. But then you know, the thing with INCE is that it's not a system that is sort of donor-centric imposed on countries, right? It were the countries in the region who jointly developed those indicators, and then other partners came in and advised. But I wouldn't say that there was this template of 84 indicators that was just dropped on a country. So in that sense, I feel quite comfortable that now we have a system that is actually really owned by those countries. Yes, long answer, but really important. I mean, this is about transforming evaluation, right? So completely agree. Yes, please. Oh, Gonzalo.
Yes. Hello. Thank you for to the panelists. The question has to do with the last part that you were saying, is nationally owned. But the problem is, especially in Latin America, where you have these swings from one political arena to another, and the systems are not necessarily political and agnostic. And to what extent the tools that you are developing are owned by other actors that go beyond the people that is in the government or sitting for a temporary position. Because if it's vulnerable, then you start from scratch again, right? Today is MESA, tomorrow will be another, and today is INCE, and tomorrow will be another name. And we've been looking in different countries at the same situation. Thank you.
May I slightly rephrase your question to benefit from Radha's present here as well? So, I mean, how do you deal with those political pressures, right? Which you are facing as well. So, how do you build a robust evaluation system in the face of those different pressures?
I do agree that political pressures would be there. But in our country, what we are doing is the schemes the government of India is initiating, implementing, whichever may be the party is going to come into power. So definitely they will be work for the socio-economic development of the country. Maybe the name may be changing, but the essence of that particular initiative would remain the same. So in that case, the performance of that particular scheme or initiative measuring, and we don't find any issue in that one. We don't find any challenge for that particular measuring of the system, because it is a measuring technique we are using. It is only whatever your targets that has to be achieved. So that performance only we are monitoring, not the political arena or political landscape we are touching upon. So that is why I would request that any country which they have wanted to develop some kind of M&D system to robust and it will be technically efficient. So that should be out of the purview of the political aspect of it. It should be relating to the people overall development, so national development. So that if that is the overall objective, and if we are creating a framework accordingly, I don't find any problem in measuring the system.
Okay, but time is almost up. But so if you're able to answer the question in your concluding remarks of less than a minute, Sohini, floor is yours, then Sarah and Marco, please.
Yeah, so maybe my concluding remarks would be to answer your question. I think, great question. I think for us, we do the partnership with the civil servant, not with the political party, so that the work can continue even if the political party changes. So that's one. The second thing is we enter into a MOU, a memorandum of understanding with the government entity, so to say. So in this case, maybe the cabinet, so that even if the individual transfers, the partnership remains. And then even if the individual is replaced, the MOU is still recognized. So I think those two have worked for us.
Okay, yeah, so I will also answer to your question in my concluding remarks. So that several questions came up about the indicators and dimensions and whatever, so the methodological part of the INCE is ever changing. This is changing. But I think what does not change is the ownership for INCE inside the country. So there were different governments in countries, but the INCE was still implemented. In 2 countries, INCE is part of the national evaluation policy now. So this is like, doesn't matter if there is a new government, INCE will still be implemented. And this is like my main point, that INCE it's not so much the data, it's this network. And the government is one partner, but then there is the VOPI, then there are the universities, then there are the international actors. So if government changes, all the others remain, and they use INCE. They have those regular meetings, and this is what makes INCE really, really special, and what also makes that INCE is not vanishing with each government.
Yeah, also from my side, I think already a couple of times these national evaluation policies were mentioned. I think the national evaluation policies are very important exactly to try to mitigate the risk that you just mentioned. You know, a national evaluation policy is not about one specific political party. It's really about, you know, the parliaments that decided to have this policy, and this policy gives the normative framework on how the evaluation system, national evaluation system, should look like and should work. So somehow protects the national evaluation system from any political or party change. But the most important is really the demand for evaluation in the country. And that's why I think it's really so important to have not only the government, but also, once again, the parliament, civil society, the media, engage in the creation of this demand for accountability, for transparency within the country. So we, as also international agencies, I think that in the past we too much focus on the offer side, I mean on strengthening the capacities to deliver good quality evaluations, but more and more we should really work on the demand side, on creating the demand, the national demand, I mean on supporting the creation of the national demand, and also the capacity of using evaluation for national policy making and decisions.
Great. Well, please join me in giving this great panel a hand. And please rate this session on the QR codes that you see on the tables. Thanks for joining us today. It was a pleasure seeing you all here, and let's continue the conversation on strengthening evaluation systems. Thank you.